maybe a little bit more since I was here last, which is plenty soon enough, some would say. But oh, there we go. But it's really terrific to get to come back here and be with all of you. I enjoy you so much and care a great deal about this congregation. My name is Bruce Kearney, and I am technically, my role here is that I am called the interim moderator, which I think really just means that I supply a little tiny bit of input and support to the people who lead this congregation so faithfully. The last time I came to you, I was the chaplain at Fraser Valley Institution, the federal prison for women in Abbotsford, and now I am, get ready, I am, how does it go, the Regional Director of Chaplaincy Services, Pacific Region of Bridges of Canada. I know. It's really quite overwhelming. I need a long business card. So you open it up, and then you open it up again. But it's pretty much the same thing as you always have. But what this means is that now I am no longer working inside one prison. So I am no longer the chaplain to Fraser Valley Institution for Women. But now I am in place to support and encourage and inspire all the chaplains in federal prisons in British Columbia and technically the Yukon, but there are no federal prisons there. So, but I'll claim the territory because I'm hoping I'll get to go sometime. So actually I get to work from home and then go out on the road to the various sites and work in conjunction with all the prisons. And there are 9 in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. And then in addition, we have chaplains who represent the Sikh community, the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the Buddhist community, and the Wiccan community. And so I work also with them to help them interact with the various prisons and to encourage them also to offer the very best kind of service they can as a chaplain and to support the people who are in prison in this province. And so I'm 2 weeks in. I don't really know all of what I do yet, but so far it seems like I answer a lot of questions about how does this work and why did this happen. Because what happened on April 1 was that we all changed, all the chaplains started working for a new company. On March 31st, we worked for a company called Kairos Numa Chaplaincy Incorporated, and I just told you I work for Bridges of Canada because March 31st was a date when a new contract with the federal government began, and our previous employer did not win the bid for that contract, and so the people that did win the bid have come along. And so it's a time of adjustment and a time of orientation and learning new ways and that kind of thing. So as you remember us, maybe you would pray for us and ask God to give us wisdom and grace, because sometimes in a startup time there are some bumps. And one of the bumps was that we came in halfway through a pay period. A very practical issue, right? When payday came, there's only half a pay there. And yet, fair enough, we only worked 1 week for that. And so just, it's just all those things coming together. But that's the new world I live in. And I think I will enjoy it very much. Well, here we have this very tender and touching story of Tabitha/Dorcas. Right? Tabitha, an Aramaic word, Dorcas, a Greek word, both of them meaning gazelle. And frankly, that means that Tabitha was a little deer. And it sounds like she really was. That she was a woman well beloved, who served people and who cared for people and very practically supported them, and they loved her. They loved her as a sister in the Lord, but they loved her as a person who, for many of them, perhaps they would say, I couldn't live without her. And so what a touching story, too, to recognize that when she died, the widows that are referred to in the story are suddenly left they're not simply bereaved of his friend, but they are bereaved of their means of living. And so it's a very powerful story. We don't get a sense that Tabitha had been ill for long. She hadn't had a debilitating illness that gets mentioned to us. In the verses previous, we hear about Peter healing a man named Aeneas, and Aeneas had been paralyzed and bedridden for 8 years, Luke tells us. So there's some context in how marvelous it is that he was healed, but we also understand his situation had been long-term, but it just is like while he was there, Tabitha became ill and died. And it was a sudden, shocking event, it appears. But it's evident that she lived in the midst of loving greatly, and accordingly, she lived in the midst of being greatly loved. You've met people who just overflow with love, right? Who have a ready acceptance of the people they come across, and they embrace them, whether physically or not. They draw them in. And they enable them to recognize how they are valued and how they are counted as being significant. And that kind of response or that kind of action in people creates that equal and opposite reaction, right? To bring physics into the world of human relationships that says that when someone loves, they are loved. And in fact, that's how God has worked things with us, because we love because he first loved us, right? That God has loved us, and in doing that has awoken within us an understanding of that love and a reciprocating love as well, so that here we sit this morning as people who love our God dearly because we've discovered that we've been far more dearly loved. But we see that people did love Tabitha, and I'll probably go back and forth between Tabitha and Dorcas, but I'm trying to call her Tabitha. We see that people really did love Tabitha in the way in which they reacted to her death. First of all, their sense of loss was so great that they took action. They were not content with simply accepting her death. Yes, well, death comes to all of us, and so it was simply her time. That wasn't anything of how they reacted to that situation. But instead, it says that they laid her in a room upstairs, and they sent people to Peter. Peter, whom they had heard of, Peter, who was not far away in Lydda, and so he had just healed Aeneas, and Peter comes to help. He had been the instrument of Jesus healing that paralyzed man, and the news had spread. No surprise. Right? If a paralyzed man who's been confined to his bed for 8 years is suddenly able to get up and go down to the market and buy his own bread, that kind of news travels. And so people in the next town over heard about this miraculous thing that had happened, and of course they were deeply impacted. And Luke tells us that all the residents of Lydda and Sharon saw Aeneas, and they turned to the Lord. They began to reckon, this is not, no one's faking this. Right? Like, Aeneas didn't stay in bed for 8 years so that today he could walk down to the market and make us think he'd been healed. He had truly been healed. And the story of Aeneas is linked to the story of Tabitha by geography. And that's how they come close side by side in the book. That Lydda, where Aeneas lived, was just over here, and Joppa, where Tabitha lived, was just over here. And so people would go back and forth, and they were traveling in the course of doing their business, and the story got told. And so when they had this terrible event happen and Tabitha died, Jesus' disciples in Joppa recognized that they needed Peter. And so they went and sent immediately for him. And their message arrived to Peter with a sense of urgency that arose out of their deep sense of bereavement and loss. But not simply from that, because if they had simply had felt bereaved and wanted someone to come and comfort them in their loss, there would have been a different message sent perhaps to Peter. But the urgency that was in their message had come to birth in their confident expectation that just as Jesus had been raised from the dead, and just as they were hearing stories of Jesus doing miraculous things through the disciples, most recently the healing of Aeneas, so they recognized that something equally marvelous, something profoundly, something very real could be done in Joppa. And that the death of Tabitha needn't be the end of her story. And thankfully, Peter recognized the importance of going with the messengers, and he hurried to the scene, and he was taken upstairs to the room where Tabitha's body had been laid. It says that they washed her and then laid her in that room. Customarily, in that hot climate, without the benefit of any kind of technology to preserve the human body, the burial followed the washing pretty promptly, because in the heat, though it was dry, the realities of what happens to a dead body and the processes of decomposition means that this is something you don't want to have in your house very long. And so they're laying her body out upstairs. It says something very real about their expectancy. Because for us, it just sounds like, yes, that's what happens. And 3 days or so later, we'd have the visitation, and then we would have a funeral maybe the day following that. And so we're accustomed to having a dead body, I mean, not in our house, but not having finished with it for several days. But they were extending their normal process significantly to allow for Peter to come and to do what they believed that he would do. And gathered around her body in that room upstairs were all the widows, it said, Luke tells us. All the widows. And they were grieving, and they were showing one another and Peter as he arrived the various items which Tabitha had made for them. It says they were showing all the tunics and other garments that she had made. They understood, these widows did, that their loss was not simply a loss of someone who was a sister in the faith. We don't really know much about Tabitha. Was she an elderly woman? Was she a middle-aged woman? Does she have a family of her own? Did she live on her own? And presumably then with the resources perhaps left to her by her husband, although it wasn't conventional for a woman to be able to own a home or to own and to have money. We don't know much about her, about how she died, anything, just that she had lived so powerfully in love, that these women stood around her and showed, look, she made me this, oh, she made me this, and she had this kind of impact on my life and this kind of impact on mine. But widows lived very vulnerable lives. They lived very vulnerably. They relied upon the generosity of their sons in order for them to survive. And so they had to hope that they had a son. That if they had no son, no man who was prepared to care for them, because it was, like I just said, the kind of world where a woman couldn't own. If she had nothing like that, she needed to find some other kind of benefactor. Or, perhaps in the case of Tabitha, a benefactress. Someone who would provide, without obligation, but simply out of the joy of giving and loving. And so, these widows recognized that their vulnerability had just increased dramatically because their benefactress had passed away so suddenly, without even time for them to prepare. And it sounds like they were wearing the items that she had made for them. That it wasn't a matter of, oh dear, Tabitha has died. Now, where did I put that sweater? I wonder if it's in the closet upstairs. And they go look in the closet upstairs. No, it's not here. It might be in the dresser back in the spare bedroom. So they went looking in all those drawers. No, not here either. Where might it be? Right? Clothes were not that plentiful. You had clothes and you wore them. And so Tabitha had kept these widows clothed. When they're showing all the items that she had made for them, they're saying, see? She made this for me. She made this for me. And so her gifts to them were of practical, everyday value. The kinds of things that if they hadn't had her, how would they have found clothing? And you can see the depth then of their reliance upon her, and also the extent of her generosity and the practicality of her gifts. Her generosity was a central matter for them. Every day they wore her love. And it sounds like, apart from what she had provided, there would have been little for them to wear. How accurate Luke was in describing her life by saying that she had been devoted to good works and acts of charity. She had lived her life purposefully, and she had produced in turn a bumper crop of fruitfulness. Tabitha lived with a sense of purpose that was aligned with her abilities. She lived a sense of purpose that was aligned with her abilities. She could make clothes, and so she did. She could do this one thing. We don't know anything about her, but she could do this one thing, and so she did it. And she did it for the people around her who needed it most. And she lived a purposeful life that was aligned with her abilities. Sometimes we see people who can do this one thing, but they don't want to. They feel like if only they could do this, then their life would be significant. This is no good. I mean, what's the value of this? What can anybody do with this? It's just that, sure I can do it, but what's it matter? I just wish I could do this. I would give anything to do this. And they live a life that is unsatisfied. They live a life of unfulfilled longing. They live a life of feeling that they are the wrong person, that they ought to be this person, but instead they are stuck being this person. What would happen if they embraced themselves? And if they said, I can do this, and I will. Right? I am good at math, so I'm going to do something with math. I am a compassionate person, and so I will care for people. It might be that a lawyer would make more money, or who knows what, Elon Musk would make more money than the nurse would, but I should be the Elon Musk. I should have inventions and become like a billionaire. That's what I should become. But it is not easy, and you have to deny yourself. Tabitha didn't. She said yes to herself, yes to the person that God had made her to be, yes to the gifts that she had received. Because, you see, what she did was she lived out her giftedness. She lived out the way God had made her. She said yes to that. And she followed it, and she gave herself, and she gave herself wholly. She understood what she could do. And without knowing all of her backstory, we know the best part of her story, which was that she was herself. She acted out her love. She was greeted with love in return. She lived a life that was aligned with her giftedness. And the implication for us is very real, very clear, for us individually and for us together. How do we say yes to who we are, and to embrace that, and to say to that person, you are a person whom God God has gifted. You are a person through whom the Lord acts. Not you are, and you are, and you are, but you are. How do we begin to see that what we do has an impact in the kingdom of God, in the community of the Spirit? You see, but Bruce, all I do is. No. What you do is. Each of us is gifted and prepared for this life that we can live in God's community that just perfectly matches the need that is around us. Together, as St. Aidan's Presbyterian Church, these gifts that we have together uniquely suit us to meeting a need in this community. And sometimes we have talked about this, about how we could feel like because we don't have this kind of person or that kind of facility, we aren't really all that we could be or what we should be, and if only we were that, that would be so much better. And read again the story of Tabitha, where she was who she was, and God used her mightily. Who are we? What are we able to do? How can God use us with the people with whom we come into contact, with the people in this community, with the needs that are here in the West? We can live out the story of Tabitha. Now the beautiful thing is, of course, in this story is the resurrection again. Right? It's so clear that she's dead. Peter sat in the room and talked to the body. It's so clear. No one's pretending. He talked to the body. And he prayed, he said, God. And she did. And she, no doubt, was restored then to those wonderful things that she had been doing. And that she lived out again for some period longer the gift of her life in her community. May we be people who similarly choose to live out the gift of who we are.